In my review of Rule of Rose, I talked extensively about its story. However, there's a lot more that I could cover about its plot and themes I didn't think would quite fit into the original review. Also, some details of the story might not be entirely clear to the player at first, so I want to make a video that gives the plot a more comprehensive overview. First, I'll summarize the story from how it actually happened in the game, as opposed to how it's presented. Then, I'll talk about certain details more closely, filling in some places with my own speculations and theories, as well as further exploring the themes and symbolisms. I'll leave a link to my original review in the description as well. So now, let's start at the beginning. The protagonist of the game is a girl named Jennifer. In 1929, she was involved in an airship accident with her parents, leaving her as the only survivor. That's when a man named Gregory found her. Gregory was a pea farmer with a son named Joshua, whom he loved dearly. At some point, Joshua fell ill and became bedridden, so his father wrote him stories to help raise the boy's spirits. Eventually, Joshua passed away, leaving Gregory distraught with suicidal thoughts and resorting to alcohol in an attempt to numb the pain. When Gregory found Jennifer, he took her into his home as a replacement for Joshua. He even dressed her like his son and called her by the name Joshua, and kept her locked in the house. While Jennifer was sympathetic towards Gregory and says that he treated her kindly, she was still a very lonely girl being forced to live a life that wasn't hers. One day, a girl from the Rose Garden orphanage named Wendy took notice of lonely Jennifer. They began to exchange letters and grew an attraction to each other, where Wendy played the princess and Jennifer the prince. Eventually, Wendy helped Jennifer escape Gregory's house. That's when they exchanged their most precious belongings with one another, as a sign of their love. Jennifer gave Wendy her stuffed bear, whom Wendy named Joshua. In turn, Wendy gave Jennifer her red rose brooch, which Jennifer would always wear. Then, they made a promise. Everlasting, true love, I am yours. This became the Rule of Rose. At the orphanage, Jennifer was happy to finally be her true self. However, as a new girl, she felt isolated and lonely, especially since she found it too emotionally painful to play airship with the other children. So she adopted a cold and distant demeanor to cope with her feelings, including her not joining the orphans in their chores. This earned her the ire of both the children and the adults who worked at the orphanage. One day, she found a puppy near the orphanage grounds. Quickly endeared, she named him Brown and kept him in a shed near the orphanage. She was eager to show Wendy, in the hopes that they could raise him together. However, Wendy was immediately jealous that she had to share Jennifer's love, so Wendy tried to persuade her into abandoning Brown. When Jennifer refused to leave Brown, Wendy developed a new plan. She recruited the other orphans into her Red Crayon Aristocrat Club by using a character she called Stray Dog as a boogeyman to scare them into obeying her. As her self-appointed leader, she called herself the Princess of the Red Rose. At their meetings, a doll would be used as a stand-in for Wendy, as she often had to stay in the sick room because of her unnamed illness. It also more easily allowed her to hide her leader identity from Jennifer. As the leader of the Aristocrat Club, Wendy attempted to further isolate Jennifer by ordering the aristocrats to act cruelly towards Jennifer. This included leaving her terrible messages, framing her for belongings gone missing, and physically harming her. Meanwhile, Jennifer quietly accepted it all. As time passed, Hoffman, the headmaster of the orphanage, was stated to have disappeared. Then, the housekeeper and cook Martha disappeared as well. Finally, the oldest of the orphans, Clara, disappeared too, leaving the children without any adult figure. When Jennifer still refused to abandon Brown, Wendy took one last measure. By her command, the aristocrats killed Brown, and Wendy finally revealed herself as the Princess of the Red Rose to Jennifer. Infuriated at Brown's murder, Jennifer attacked Wendy and struck her multiple times, screaming about how horrible the princess was. Then, Jennifer called out the other aristocrats for their cruelty, before finally shaming herself into letting things go as far as they did. After her outburst, she rips off the rose brooch from her dress and tosses it on the ground. Humiliated and heartbroken, Wendy tearfully runs out of the room. Not long after the incident, the aristocrats apologized for their past behavior and informed Jennifer that they've kicked Wendy from her throne. That's when they declared Jennifer as their new princess. Before Jennifer's new reign begins, the aristocrats take notice of Wendy outside, and all go out to meet her. That's when they're all brutally massacred by Stray Dog, who is revealed to be Gregory. Jennifer witnesses the horror that just occurred, Wendy confesses that she had disguised herself as Joshua in order to manipulate Gregory. She expresses her deep regret for everything she had done and gives Jennifer Gregory's gun, before Wendy is also killed. In a moment of mental clarity, Gregory realizes the atrocity he's committed. That's when Jennifer gives him his gun. He says, "I'm sorry, Joshua," before ending his own life. Several years pass, and now a 19-year-old Jennifer begins her journey in recovering her childhood memories. After a mentally difficult struggle, she finally remembers things for how they really were. While she remembers the trauma that the other orphans inflicted on her, she holds no grudge or resentment towards them. While she keeps a hold of her memories, both good and bad, and the lessons she's learned from them, she also won't let them keep her chained in the past. Then, she makes one last promise to her dear Brown. Everlasting, true love, I am yours. Finally, she's able to move on. That's the story that's made most apparent, but there are many other details that aren't quite as clear. For one, there's a question of what happened to the adults in Clara. Hoffman was said to be the first to disappear. If you read his diary in the epilogue, he notes that the orphans have been spreading strange rumors about a stray dog that kidnaps children. In his final entry, he states that he's leaving the orphanage and having Clara take care of things. While it's not made explicitly clear why he left, he makes note of the stray dog rumor a few times in his diary. He also blames Jennifer's arrival for all the trouble that's occurred. Seeing as how closely tied Jennifer is to Gregory, aka the stray dog, it would seem Hoffman correctly theorized that there's a terrible truth to those rumors and connected them to Gregory. Of course, instead of trying to do something about it to protect the children, Hoffman ran away to save his own skin. As for Martha, we can infer that she was killed based on a cutscene in the game. In the real world, you can find letters she wrote to the police, informing them that she's seen some disturbing behavior regarding Wendy and Gregory. However, her pleas for help were ignored. Therefore, I think it's possible that Wendy noticed that Martha knew too much, so Wendy had Gregory kill her. Her sudden death is further evidenced by her final letter to the police, where her writing is abruptly cut short. This would also explain why Hoffman was spared if he also knew the truth. He chose to run away and say nothing, while Martha suffered for trying to do the right thing. Which leaves us with Clara. There are many moments during the game that point to her being sexually abused by Hoffman. Interestingly enough, in Hoffman's diary, he states that she herself wanted to continue staying in the orphanage to help, even though she's 16 and reaching adulthood. It seems a bit strange that she would want to continue staying with the person who's assaulting her. However, I think it's possible that she caught on to Hoffman taking interest in Diana, and Clara hopes that by staying, he wouldn't abuse Diana or the other girls the same way he did with her. After all, while we see Hoffman touching Diana inappropriately, his assault on Clara is all but outright stated to be more explicit. As Diana would grow more into adolescence and closer to Clara's age, he might take it a step further if Diana's the only one in that age range in the orphanage. Given the hints of Clara physically harming herself to cope with her trauma, some people suspect that she committed suicide after the adults left. While that's definitely a possibility, since there isn't any indication of what exactly happened, I think it's also possible that she simply ran away. She wasn't ready to take on responsibilities of caring for several children on her own, but with Hoffman gone, she didn't think they would be in any danger. She finally felt free, like someone dumping their unwanted pet fish into a lake, and took the opportunity to escape. There's also a fair bit of mystery in regards to what's occurring with Jennifer mentally. We know that she's 19 years old during the present time of the game, and that she's re-experiencing her childhood memories as she tries to remember everything that happened. It's very likely that the trauma she endured is more responsible for her foggy memory than the passage of time. Other than that, what is actually happening around her is pretty ambiguous. The first time we see Jennifer, she's asleep on a bus. Shortly after, she arrives at the Rose Garden Orphanage. To me, this means she took the initiative to make the journey back there, in the hopes that would help recover her memories. Her memory not being entirely clear yet could also be the reason why she sees the other orphans wearing paper bags over their heads at first. She knows that there were other children, but she can't quite yet remember their faces. Of course, no one is actually there. She's also obviously not actually taken aboard an airship, but why does her mind conjure an airship in the first place? I think it has to do with the fact that it was an airship crash that triggered the chain of events in the game. So her mind merged the origins of these events with the memories of her time at the orphanage. It's also why various objects and symbols associated with the children she meets can be found here. Throughout the game, she encounters imp enemies that will attack her if she lets them get near. Jennifer is not in any real physical danger, so why does she lose health if she takes damage from what are basically figments of her imagination? In the epilogue, she explains that the children told scary stories about these creatures, saying that they swept away naughty children, and drawings of them can be found in the orphanage. Therefore, I believe that these imps are manifestations of her fear of the truth, and they try to sweep her away from these bad memories, if you will. By extension, Jennifer losing all of her health doesn't represent her literally dying, but rather her losing her will to continue. That would also mean that her health bar doesn't indicate her losing her physical health, but rather her mental health. You can also see that eating sweets will restore her health. To me, I think that means she keeps a stash of goodies on her that she occasionally indulges in whenever she needs a pick-me-up. Either that, or she's finding decade-old food scattered throughout the abandoned orphanage and eating it. Which would be kind of gross, so let's move on from that. There are actually two endings to the game. The canon ending is the one that leads to the final epilogue chapter, but there's another ending in which Jennifer herself shoots Gregory and kills him, which abruptly ends the game then and there. This event is the final memory of her childhood that she needs to uncover. Her shooting Gregory would mean that she remembered incorrectly, and the final key to her memories is lost. It's also the most obvious looking solution, and if the player didn't know beforehand, there's a good chance that this action is the one they would have done. However, it's the less predictable route that's the correct one, and is the last step for Jennifer fully recovering her childhood memories. The epilogue is the calmest and most somber chapter in the game. There's a sepia filter over the screen, a melancholy piano plays in the background, and though she can't see them, Jennifer can hear the orphans calling out to her. There are also no enemies to be found, meaning she is now finally at peace mentally. Although the player sees a sunny day as they control child Jennifer, to me, what adult Jennifer is seeing is now the long-abandoned orphanage the way it was before that fateful day. There's seemingly no indication that the orphanage was investigated after the incident, so it's likely that just about everything was left almost exactly as she saw it last. It's why she could still find letters tucked away, items still in the last places she saw them, and drawings still all over the floors and walls. It would also explain why much of the game is a long series of fetch quests. As she's searching through the orphanage, she's finding the things she associated with everyone who lived there, which is helping her remember the people behind those items. In fact, after reading Martha's letter, Jennifer says, perhaps if the matter had been addressed publicly, things wouldn't have turned out as they did. This could mean that the incident at the orphanage was uninvestigated, covered up, and forgotten. During all of this, we get to see Jennifer as a child. While a part of her still feels like a little girl, it's okay for her to be vulnerable now, because she's no longer afraid. Therefore, she doesn't need to uphold her adult front in order to confront her past. Finally, she closes the door on both Wendy and Brown, the two she loved most, locking them away. While she's moving past the pain they brought her, she's also keeping their memories safe within her mind, ensuring that they're never forgotten again. And that's my analysis of Rule of Rose. I think it's interesting how much of the game's story and symbolisms can be interpreted in so many ways. And if you agree, disagree, or otherwise have your own thoughts and opinions on the game, feel free to leave them in the comments. Thanks so much for watching! If you enjoyed the video, be sure to click like, and subscribe if you want to see more.